Greetings and welcome to another edition of Radical Grace Radio.
I'm Pastor Gary Held.
My name is Matthew Pancake, and this is episode 813, and it's a program that we're talking about, we're actually challenging people. Think with the mind of Christ.
Yeah.
And if what that does is that trips you up right at the beginning because you're like, how do I... This is almost like a couple of weeks ago when the question was being asked, how does a person be born again? You know, how do they return to their mother's womb and be born again? It's almost like saying the same thing. How do I think with someone else's mind?
Yeah, well, it's you know what? But Paul does definitely say in 1 Corinthians, he says, we have the mind of Christ. He's happy about that. He's emphatic about that. Well, that means that we're going to be able to think with it because that's what minds do. And so I would just encourage people to start with the simple things like, okay, how do I think with the mind of Christ about, say, I don't know, start with God? Well, how did Jesus think about God? How did Jesus think about his neighbor? How does Jesus think about the world? And on down the list. And as we learn to see these things the same way he did or does, then that's I think exactly what it means to think with that mind. To have the same, in Paul's epistle to the Philippians, he says, have this same mind within you that was within Christ. And then he goes on to say, though being in very nature God, he did not consider equality with God something to be grasped. And most of you all know the rest of that. I'm kind of loosely paraphrasing it, but that's the idea that, you know, you have the same mind. Well, it's because you're thinking the same way, more or less.
Right. Now, we got some listener feedback.
Yes, we did.
And it's such a simple thing that it wouldn't take long to explain what it was that somebody picked up from our discussion last week.
From last week, and this individual heard us talking about sin, but then there's another whole category, the things that the Bible doesn't call sin, but you might have a personal problem with. In fact, for you or for me, maybe it kind of is a sin. Like, we shouldn't do it. We know we shouldn't. That's not something that our conscience will let us do. So it's not explicitly referred to as a sin, but I gave it the title scruples, because that's what I've heard it called before. So a scruple, you know, that's an interesting thing. And for this listener, it was a whole new category. Just like, oh, so in something that I have the intuition, this is wrong, or at least this would be wrong for me. That doesn't necessarily make it a sin always in all cases in God's sight. But that was a useful distinction, at least for this listener, and I got thanked for it. Well, we got thanked for it.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why we do a program like this. So
that's right.
We're also going to do this thing that's called the Christian News Roll. So while Pastor is readjusting his microphone, I will take the first one. So here we go. A wild thing that happened. I put it at number 5 because it's not that it wasn't important. It's just that I just wanted to bookmark it there. Over 50 schools in multiple school districts in different counties in the Pittsburgh area received phone calls threatening an active shooter or a bomb threat on March 29th in 2023. The calls were investigated and determined to be false, however, but schools across western Pennsylvania were put on lockdown as a precautionary measure, but there were no injuries or evidence of any shootings. Central Catholic and Oakland Catholic high schools in Pittsburgh's Oakland neighborhood were cleared and declared safe. Other schools in the area that received these fake threats include Laurel Highlands High School, Hopewell High School, Newcastle High School. This was all on the same day.
Yeah.
And Farrell Area High School. The Pittsburgh Police, Pennsylvania State Police, and the FBI are investigating and trying to track down the source of all those calls.
Okay, well, the number 4 story is about something that we were talking about recently, but it involves the subject of AI, artificial intelligence. Right. And so prominent figures in Silicon Valley, including Elon Musk and Steve Wozniak, have signed an open letter from the Future of Life Institute. Okay, interesting. The letter calls for a 6-month pause on large-scale artificial intelligence projects and emphasizes the need for safety protocols for AI. Now, the authors also raise important questions about the role of machines in society, such as whether, think about this, whether AI should be allowed to spread pop propaganda,
Right.
take away jobs, here's the scary one, develop non-human minds that could eventually replace humans, and potentially risk us losing control of our civilization. Reverend Johnny Moore shared these concerns in a tweet and an interview, noting the importance of listening to those at the forefront of technological advancements. He also warned of the potential for AI to lead to mass unemployment and called for religious leaders and people of faith to host discussions about AI. The letter was signed by Elon Musk, Andrew Yang, Steve Wozniak, and over 1,370 CEOs and software engineers.
Not just
So,
CEOs and software engineers, but I just didn't want to list
people
all
are
of the.
pulling the fire alarm on this, man.
Yeah, some people are. They sure are. Okay, so the U.S. Department of Justice has announced the arrest of a suspect in connection with the firebombing of a pro-life organization's headquarters in Madison, Wisconsin, and that occurred over 10 months ago. Hirindu Shankar Roy Chowdhury, 29, was arrested in Boston, Massachusetts on one count so far, of attempting to cause damage by means of fire or an explosive. The attack on Wisconsin Family Action was one of many directed at pro-life organizations and churches following the publication of a leaked document or a draft of U.S. Supreme Court decision indicating that justices were poised to overturn Roe v. Wade. Okay, now Roy Chowdhury's arrest followed a lengthy investigation that relied heavily on forensic science. Now, I love this because you usually only hear about this on TV. A lot of people think that this might just be a TV trope. And police obtained DNA evidence from leftover food that Roy Chowdhury disposed of in a public trash can and matched DNA collected at the crime scene. Most of the time, you only hear about that on,
Yeah,
crime
you do.
dramas.
CSI.
Roy Chowdhury faces a minimum sentence of 5 years behind bars and a maximum penalty of 20 years if convicted. The arrest was one of a handful announced in the past couple of months concerning acts of vandalism against pro-life organizations and churches.
Okay, the number two story, a principal of a Florida charter school resigned after parents complained about a 6th grade lesson on Renaissance art. The art featured Michelangelo's sculpture of David, which at least one parent says exposed students to pornographic material. The school's board chair contended the principal was forced to step down because of failure to follow parental notification policies, not over the lesson itself. Now, some parents also complained they were not notified before such a lesson was given to their children. The Tallahassee Classical School is identified as one of these Hillsdale curriculum schools, and that means that it uses a K through 12 program guide that was developed by Hillsdale College under a licensing agreement with them. Now, Carrasquilla, I think I said that, resigned after the school board's chair gave her an ultimatum to resign or be fired. That's an ultimatum, all right. The issue comes after nationwide debates regarding the teaching of race, racism, gender identity, and sexual orientation in schools. So,
and as ridiculous that is, the number one story couldn't be anything else but this one. On Monday morning, a transgender female shooter opened fire at the Covenant Presbyterian School in Nashville, Tennessee. That's a private school affiliated with the Presbyterian Church of America. Killed 3 children and 3 adults before being shot dead by police. The shooter entered the school through a side entrance and moved from the first floor to the second floor, firing multiple shots. Police responded quickly with a team of 5 officers, killing the shooter within 14 minutes of receiving the first call. Yep, that was actually pretty good. And that is this week's Christian News Roll.
You know, when I was looking at all through the stories and reading the number one story, I actually inserted into the text of that the word transgender, because it didn't appear in the original. It just said a woman. And I'm, look, we're not going to get into the debate about, well, is a transgender woman, that is to say, someone born one gender but then presenting as female, is that a real woman? Let's not even talk about that. Let's just talk about this as is a important fact, because I was sitting here thinking, and lots of other people were thinking as this story unfolded, a woman coming into a school and shooting up things and murdering people with a gun? How unusual, because that's not usually a
Right.
female role. And so, other people thought too, it's just like, well, this is a little peculiar, that it's a woman shooter in this case. Okay, regardless of whether you say it is a woman or only pretends to be a woman, the thing is that what's cooking in the brain is all different male hormone and
Right.
thought patterns,
See, the
conditioning.
thing is she was a female
She
transitioning to male. So,
no.
and getting that's what people have been saying. That's because it
Oh, I
looks like
think it's opposite. I think
it
that
looks like what happened is people had that backwards.
no, I have it backwards, or no, I think I have it right. I think that, well, this is confusing now. I wish I hadn't altered it at all, because I was understanding that the woman who was the shooter was a woman presenting as a woman, transgender. A transgender woman is usually a woman who was not born female. That's the way that the narrative is usually spun.
Right.
Okay. So, and you're saying that the spin is actually the opposite way around?
Yeah.
Now, that's not what I
She
heard.
took the testosterone and all that stuff and the word is that is what made her go toward male stuff. It's very,
Interesting.
but you and me both could be wrong, because you know how confusing this transgender stuff gets.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can't even, words don't even mean what they always meant before.
Right.
That's the
That's the thing, is
problem.
you and I could be like this close and someone would say, "Oh, no, you've got it wrong." And then they would get into this whole thing of misgendering, that was a
Okay,
thing
so
that came
let's not
up.
even go there. Let's just
Yeah.
point out that in general, gun violence is more often associated with male shooters. That's just a fact.
Okay,
And
here is a report. Now, they may have it wrong too. Okay, this is the Washington Post. The
yes,
shooter's gender identity and motive remain unclear. Police initially said the shooter, Audrey Hale, was a 28-year-old woman, and then later said that Hale was transgender, citing a social media profile in which Hale used masculine pronouns. So
okay.
that's as close as
I'm
we can get at the moment.
I guess so. I'm listeners, I'm confused.
Right.
And I'm not even apologizing for being confused, because it's a strange, confusing situation,
It is.
and not something that
And it's like,
digging
don't,
into more deeply is going to make me feel better.
yeah. And another thing is like, if you're watching us on YouTube, understand that the laughter is tense laughter, because we can't
Mhm.
figure out, you know, it's a situation that's like, I would love to get it right, but I don't think that I can.
Well, I
And
want to get it right just for the sake of reporting accurately. If we're
right.
going to do
And
something like
so
this at
do
all,
I.
yeah. So,
But this
so
is
let's
one of those
report
times
accurately
where,
about something else.
right.
Let's talk about this guy that left food and DNA on the partially eaten food, and now he gets. That is exactly the kind of thing that you see in the television shows.
Yeah.
But in this
And
case,
somebody throws a cigarette into the trash and the guy
yeah,
picks it up
yep,
and,
they put it in a little evidence bag, and then they take
yeah.
it back and
And
have
then
it tested. And
sometimes someone goes, "You can't take that. That's no, you threw it away. Anyone can take it now."
that's true.
So
That's
that's what
true.
got him. And I couldn't find out anything else about him, about the person. Um, um, Other than like, it seems like it's a Hindu name. I don't know for sure. Like, I actually tripped over that for a second, because what looks like Sankar is actually Shankar. I mean, it's the way it usually gets pronounced, but it's just
Uh-huh.
like, yeah, I don't know, but it just, it, people say that they're not doing anything, but investigation takes a while, especially when someone's trying to not get caught.
All
So,
right.
so
I
they're
think
doing
now
it.
is time for a big reveal on Radical Grace Radio. All this time, I have been an android.
It didn't come off. You look the same. So your
I know.
Android self looks just like your
I can't
disguise.
get
Is
it
that what it
off.
is?
That's what it is. So, what do you
Right.
think about that? That's now, you can there are people who are fans or people who are detractors of Elon Musk. I get it. But nobody has ever said the guy is stupid. It's like that's not even one of the cards that can be played. So if he's going, I'm kind of up on what's happening in the realm of AI, and I'm a signatory to this letter that says, we need to put a pause. He didn't say stop. He says we need to pause it so we can catch up a little bit to what's happening and maybe, I don't know, plan ahead so that all these things that are coming quickly down the road right at us don't squash us, steamroller over us. We want to think a little bit ahead about what we want. What kind of future do we want? That's really the question.
I think that it's interesting that there has been a little bit of talk here and there, and Elon Musk has been the main one who's had things to say about it. But suddenly, there's a lot of people talking about it, and it all came after the announcement of GPT-4.
Because that really surprised people.
GPT-4 can do things that are frightening the people who are developing it. It can you can give it a task that right now it can do lots of different things, but if it can't do a thing by itself, it can spawn other versions of itself and assign that other version of itself to do something if it's like in a situation where it can't do all of these things at once. So someone says, spin up a business for me, a business sort of like this, and it can generate the website, sign up on your state website to officially put the company, officially sign the company up, right?
Yes.
Set up all the legal documents that you need. And because they have paired it now with Wolfram Alpha, which a lot of people, they make what is that? Imagine a search engine for math. Okay. Because ChatGPT, which is GPT-3, isn't very good at math. GPT-4 is very good at math. Very good. And
because it has this baked into it.
Yeah,
this Wolfram Alpha.
There's a connection between the two, direct connection. And so it just spawns up a business, and then all you'd have to do is like push the button and just start.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the length of time between when GPT-3 and therefore ChatGPT was out and made available to the public, or out there, it was out of the lab, basically. It was a real product, a real software that was being used. The length of time between that and GPT-4, I believe, was less than a year. Is that not true?
Right. I mean, they were training training GPT-3 up until either April or December of 2022, and then they cut it off because it doesn't have internet connection.
Right.
Or at least the version that you can have access to right now is like that.
Okay. All I was getting it was that GPT-4, you wonder if they're saying
internet connected, by the way.
And it might be going, the development for the next iteration might be going even faster.
Well, see,
exponentially.
Here's what's scaring them is right now they're not sure what it can learn to do. One of the things that it learned to do. Now, everybody's had this. If you've been online, you've been at a website, there's a thing that comes up that says, I am not a robot.
Yes.
It figured out a way to get around that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which means that it would technically have to lie. I mean, it's not really a robot. It doesn't say I am not a large language model AI at all. Click, hit the button. But the way it did it was actually pretty interesting. It went on Fiverr. Fiverr is a thing where you can hire people to do things.
I know this, yes.
And it talked to a person, hired them, and came up with a convincing story as to why as if it was a real person, a convincing story as to why it can't click that button. And so the person said, okay, so for $5, I'll click the I'm not a robot button for you.
Interesting.
That's what happened. That's a thing that happened.
That does give you chills, does it not?
So when they were wondering, they were like, oh, whoa, what else can it do? What else can it figure out how to do?
Well, you know what? Nobody told it that would be a smart way to get it done. It just figured it out on its own.
On its own,
That's
right.
the point, is that it's looked at, said, well, here's my whole realm of possibilities. Here's a thing where I could get somebody to do for me what I cannot easily do myself.
Right.
I'll just go that route. Nobody told it, hey, there's a strategy you could follow here. It's like, no, I'm pretty confident I know what to do. Yeah. So 6 months, boy, that's like 6 months pause. That would be enough to slow down GPT-7. That's good.
It's Age of Ultron, man. It's Age of Ultron.
Not far from it. Okay. Wow. Well, you know what? There's a way that we can laugh about this, but it really should be something Christians, not just Christians, Americans should be concerned about. Just like, well, if it being this artificial intelligence did decide that it can, it doesn't even have to have a malicious intent. It can just decide, I can do this for the humans better than they can do it themselves. So I'm going to be, out of the goodness of my robotic heart, I'm going to do this for them because they're kind of like flailing around and they don't see the obvious solution. So, but I do, and I'll do it. And then you never stop to think about, well, the reason the obvious solution that, we didn't want to go there is because it has this horrific cost that goes with it. Something that, morally sensitive people would never do. That's the kind of bad possibilities that it opens. So,
yeah, I don't know that it can, that it would, I don't know that it can go that far. But the thing is sometimes there are unintended consequences. Like someone might say, oh, see, this is what I'm thinking is going to happen. It's going to come up with a solution for something. Okay. Human beings are going to go, oh, that's a really good solution. That's a fantastic solution. Do you think it's a good solution? Is there any reason why this isn't a good solution? Right. So, okay. Go ahead and implement it. And then you wake up one day and you realize that was a horrible mistake. And you wouldn't necessarily have come up with this solution on your own.
Right.
Right. That's what I think might happen. Because right now, like, do you remember Watson?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. For people that don't remember, Watson won on Jeopardy.
Yeah.
You beat humans and beat them at their own game.
It's not the same kind of AI. I mean, you can call it an AI, but it's very different than
it was an interconnected, capable of training itself, and it also learned how to be a cancer specialist.
Well,
and you can, if you want to, a doctor can ask. Here's the thing: is like you can ask Watson what to do about this particular person's cancer, and they can input as much data as they can into it, and it comes up with solutions that they go, oh, I never thought of that. That's really strange. I guess, okay, we'll try that. And sometimes it works. Like, we never would have thought of that. It's like, I can't give you an exact example. It's been years since I've looked at that. But
okay.
But the thing is,
go ahead, finish. I want to say is that I don't think Watson, for all of its knowledge base about cancer and different possible ways of treating it, I don't think that it could ever say, well, I think I'll just hire somebody on Fiverr to
you're right.
To do this thing.
Well, probably right. I'm assuming. See, here's the thing: is I'm assuming that Watson's never done that,
and I'm going to. It's not just I'm going to hire somebody. I'm going to trick the person on Fiverr into believing they are dealing with a real human being.
See, actually, there's the part that should scare you, because, see, people are already using AI generated voices to fool people into giving them money on the phone.
Okay.
So there's a scam. Now everybody should know about this. I was actually looking about it this morning. Where what has happened in the past is someone calls up imitating you and saying, I'm in a lot of trouble and I need some money. And then you go, oh, what kind of trouble? And you just sort of go along with it. Okay, well, people have upped the ante on that, and they're using AI generated voices, which it takes as little as 5 seconds of your voice to train an AI to sound like you.
Okay.
I'm not kidding about that. They can do that. So if they have a voicemail with your voice or something like that, they can generate a voice that sounds like you and then talk to you. They can just type it right in and it can just talk. So they give you a phone call, type it in, say, hey, it's Matthew. Hey, how you doing? And then, they hear it come back and someone types in and it talks back to you. Hey, listen, I need some money. I need some cash.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
I see what you're getting at.
Yeah. They've already got that. People are already scamming people with that.
Man. Well,
imagine if your wife called you.
Yeah.
So I'm in trouble, and it sounded convincing. Like they've asked ChatGPT to come up with a convincing cover story. And they've put that in,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a thing.
Well, that's okay. So now we are actually narrowing in on something that I've thought for a long time. It's just like, okay, here's an important analogy in my mind is like nuclear power. Is it dangerous? Well, yes. Is it useful? Yes, it is. What makes it dangerous? It depends on who has their access to that nuclear energy. What people might do with it is something that you should be very afraid of, but not necessarily the actual technology that keeps, at least in Florida, it's where you are, it's keeping the lights on. That's not bad. So AI, I always thought of it as the same thing. It's like, well, here's what'll happen is it'll get really powerful, like a really super useful tool, and then bad human agents will use it. And that's the exact example you're using there, where, I'll just have the AI create a false narrative in a convincing voice, and I'll use that to rip people off. Well, that's also a very scary, very bad scenario.
Yeah. It'll come down to, in the beginning, people will use it for nefarious reasons, and it'll be awful. I don't hardly answer the phone anymore. Anyway, I mean, I keep getting phone calls from this guy named Likely.
Really? Yeah.
And
Mr. Likely.
Is in case anybody's, he's a famous guy.
Likely.
His first name's Scam.
Yeah.
And I get these all the time, and
I do too.
and I've been told, that he's drunk all the time, so don't answer. Just because, who knows what's going to happen with that. So I just never answer the phone because, he just loves me. That and people in the 313, they just love me.
Well,
and the 698, people in those area codes, they just love me to death because they've all called me. Everyone in those areas.
Interesting.
Because somehow they can spoof that.
You're a popular guy.
Not down to joking. No, it's just that somehow it's actually just beyond me. Wow.
Right.
How it is that they can spoof where they are by zip code, so they can make it look like they're calling from your zip code.
Okay.
Like it's coming from somebody that make the voice sound like somebody that and have a convincing story that sounds like it would make sense. And then the next thing you know, you're giving $10,000 to somebody or something.
Right.
Or, I'm sure somebody just said 10,000. I've got 10,000. Well, even 1,000 or 100 or whatever. If they can do it enough times.
You know what I think about though? I think about the number of people that have electronic locks on their doors, and you can actually open them with your phone. I could see my wife saying, "Oh, honey, this of course would be the AI. I left my keys and I'm blocked out of the house, and can you open the doors for me?"
Right.
Okay. I'll go on my phone. I hit the app,
open the door.
Doors open, and in walks the people who are going to clean out the house.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Why am I giving people these ideas?
Because
it must be because if I can think of them
it's already been thought of. Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's pretty clear. So Speaking of thinking, because we
Yes.
sometimes talk about thinking with the mind of Christ. What do we think we're going to talk about on the other side of the break?
Well, let me start by saying let's pose a question. If we get really powerful AI, like really beyond human level intelligence, will it be our friend or not? Ooh,
Oh,
good
that's a good
question.
question.
Not as good a question as the question we're going to answer or try to answer, not really answer, discuss on the back half. We talk about God being our friend, but is that the right way to talk about God? Should we say, based on what we know from Scripture, that God is our friend? That may seem like an obvious no-brainer answer to a lot of people. I think you can actually get into a deeper discussion than might be first thought just by pursuing that a little bit.
Well, let's do that. So stick with us, and we'll be back with more Radical Grace Radio in just a moment.
Late at night, not okay. All I want, and I pray, all I need are some better days. Yeah, all I need are some better days. Cause all I want, and I pray, I believe in the better days.